grandstanding on $5 million, the grand prize of the most insane competition show you've ever seen.
Beast Games is out. I competed in it, and I had a chance to sit down with my friend and fellow competitor Marc to talk about the experience. Here are some clips from our discussion.
Of the 11 games that you played, 7 of them were based on self-sacrifice. Have you reflected at all about that?
My wife has this saying, it's like, as a thing starts, it will end.
It was a pure environment to really observe humans in almost a primal way.
It feels like do or die, and so you instantly connect with people. I always saw failure as tied into me somehow being, sorry, bro, I'm feeling this, man.
The game was the veneer to a deeper experience.
Sure, yeah. A lot of it does seem like it just comes down to luck. But then I can hear my wife saying, but does it though? I was dumbfounded. Mr. Beast is looking at me like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Marc was one of my best friends from the games, but I didn't know him before we got to Vegas. We somehow ended up in the corner of Allegiant Stadium. Our sleeping bags were like 10 feet apart. And so we literally spent hours and hours talking about life, spirituality, the games, and so much more. In this video, we reprised our discussion, and like always, we went deep into the conversation and talked about all sorts of things, from truth to karma to war to statistics to determinism, and all sorts of details, of course, about Beast Games that you won't find out on the Amazon Prime show. Hey, while you're here, subscribe for more content like this. And one last recommendation, perhaps consider watching the video 1.5 speed. I find it's a little more entertaining. I had more fun listening to it than actually making it. Hope you do too. Talk to you soon.
Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go, baby.
Tell me this.
Go.
Which was more profound for you as an experience? The Vegas games or the Toronto games?
Profound. I would say they both were equally kind of profound. It's just that I felt like the stakes were really high in Vegas just because I knew if I didn't pass Vegas, I wasn't moving on to the actual games like we both did, right? And my overall memory of it was exhilarating, but it was tough. Like, I didn't think it was going to be that hard because we were sleep deprived. We were deprived of our phones, like connection with the outside world. All we had was each other in the stadium, strangers, all vying for a spot to win $5 million. So stress levels were already really high, away from our families for days, very low food intake. I mean, I think I calculated it was like 850 calories a day. And, on average, you take in 2,500 calories a day. So there was a huge deficit there. And I actually lost like 6 pounds, which is great. I could see my abs, but it was like that added to the mental kind of physical struggle. And it was just compounded by the fact that we're having to perform, you know what I mean? And we didn't know what was to expect. So it was tough, like all around, but I'm glad we made it through. You know what I mean?
Well, the Vegas games, I came home from the Vegas games and it was super weird. How do I explain it? First of all, I was exhausted. I think at every level, emotionally, physically, bit sleep deprived, hadn't eaten a lot of food. And then the emotional journey of those games was so profound that I came back and I felt different. And it took me a few days to recover.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the Toronto games, I wasn't there. I mean, I played one game, took a day, and then I was home. But you spent a week. I mean, more than a week, right? I mean, you spent like 3 days for the first episode.
Yeah, it was close to a week. I think it was about 7 days. I don't remember exactly. Time just kind of, we lost track of time, but it was at least 6 to 8 days. I think it was 7, but anyway, which was crazy because it took like 4 days to film that one episode 2. So there was a lot of downtime. I mean, the actual screen time of filming a game was like one night, and the rest of the nights were just kind of waiting around and hanging out, which wasn't bad at all, which was a huge contrast to Vegas, because in Vegas, now I understand it was like different. Like, I don't think Amazon was fully involved with Vegas as much as they were in Toronto, because Amazon started in Toronto. You know what I mean?
Right.
Different crew, different location, different workflow and everything. And Dude, it was quite the opposite. Instead of 850 calories a day, we had like unlimited calories per day, pretty much. Like food was
Wow.
readily available, um, snacks, drinks. Yeah, and it was kind of like going away to summer camp, which was kind of fun. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me this. I'm sorry. You said it took
Yeah,
4 days to shoot episode 2 in the city.
exactly. Yeah, the tower.
What
What's
the heck is going on?
what?
What are those balloons? I don't freaking know what's going on.
Woo! Party! Anyway,
Okay. 4 days?
yeah, bro.
What?
At least three. It was like pretty much one floor per day. Um, because we filmed at night, so we didn't start shooting or gathering people until after dark, which was at that time maybe around 7, 8.
No
Um,
way.
yeah, yeah. And then we'd go until about 1, 2. I think one night we went until about 3 in the morning. Thankfully they let us kind of chill the rest of the next day. Well, every day they did. There wasn't much activity during the daytime other than you could work out, you could play basketball, you could just lounge, you could eat, meet with people. That's pretty much all everyone did.
Okay, so if you were in the first game, which I think was the Hope You Can Catch game, and
Yeah,
you lost, you were escorted. You left.
you were gone that
You were
night.
gone.
Yep.
But if you were in the fourth game, which was the trivia game, I think, and you lost, you got 3 more days in the city to chill while you waited for your game. Is that accurate?
Uh, you mean the trivia game? That was actually filmed last.
Right. What I
Of
mean is like
of the
yeah, so the people who lost in that game though had like 3 more days in the city because they were waiting for their game to take place. You see what I'm saying? Like they lost in the same episode, but they had a much longer time in the city. Is that true?
They did, but it was before that since they
Right.
filmed last. So they
Right.
were waiting like 3. Yeah, you're right. 3 days for their
Oh
for
my gosh.
I know, right? At least we got to watch each game kind of play out because there were like
Mhm.
bleacher stands and all the other
Totally.
teams, 3 other teams who weren't, filming that day got to watch everything. So, I mean, it was fun in that sense too because you're like rooting on your friends and uh
Totally.
but at the same time it's like, oh my gosh, half the people are getting cut, which was crazy. Yeah, and that's one thing I was talking to someone else, Travis. I don't know if you know Travis. He lives here in Sherman Oaks in LA as well, but he was saying he's surprised by how much time is compressed because one episode took 4 days of filming and they're showing all these emotions and there isn't really a connection with these people yet because it's literally the first and second episode. But we've been with each other for like a week, even prior to that during Vegas, like
Totally.
another week or whatever, almost a week. So we know these people already, and we've developed relationships and close relationships. Especially, we're put in these situations where it's like it feels like do or die, and so you instantly connect with people and on a deeper emotional level than you would in a normal situation. So the tears were real, the emotions were real. It's just that when you watch it played out in like 30 minutes on TV, it's like, wow, there's so much left out, which is fine. That's the nature of these types of shows. But we're talking about real emotions here. You know what I mean?
Right.
Uh, that 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 was super interesting for me to experience and observe as well because it's like very rarely can you be put in these situations um, in such a sped up time frame
Right.
where your emotions can go from 0 to 60 and like that. You know what I mean? With people who you don't know and you instantly bond with them, which is just interesting. It's super fun, but
Right.
like wow.
There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. The closest analogy I've been able to conjure up, and it's a bit disrespectful, so I say it loosely, but the closest analogy I've been able to conjure up is some level of combat.
Yeah,
Because I can't think of anything else that you have like almost a brotherhood with the people that you competed with all these ups and downs. Like it felt like life or death to us in certain games. Clearly, it was nothing of the sort, but emotionally, there was this journey. And so
sure.
I think that's one thing that I don't think they can convey it in the speed with their editing
Right.
because I remember watching maybe episode one here again the other night,
Hmm.
and people are crying, and I'm like, it almost doesn't make sense why they're crying until I'm like, oh yeah, I was there. I get it. I get it. The
Yeah.
relationships, the stakes, right? What you had to do to get to that point, even to get to the first episode, you had to survive everything in Vegas, which was this euphoric roller coaster. So,
Yeah.
I think that's probably not possible to convey, and if it is, it would take a much longer form content.
Which could be cool. I mean, I don't know if they're planning to come out with a behind the scenes kind of show. That would actually be really fun for me to watch because
Oh,
then you could flesh out more stories, backstories, even if people's journeys were only lasted a few episodes, like me or like you. It'd still be fun and entertaining, I think, to re-engage in that. Uh, I don't know, relationship,
totally.
I suppose.
Well, it occurred to me, okay, Mr. Beast is focused on YouTube, and he understands
Mhm.
YouTube's about retention and thumbnails and titles, and he has his KPIs all down there. But I'm like,
Sure.
I just have this weird belief that if they took the Vegas games, for example, and instead of making a 22-minute edit out of 4 games, if they made 4 45-minute edits, one for each game,
One for
I
each
just
game.
I just think there'd be an audience. I think you could edit it and be extremely compelling. Extremely compelling.
I agree. I agree 100%. Just because, well, I mean, there have been games like this done in the past that he's done with far less at stake, $1 million prize, uh, people in the woods or whatever. I don't know if you've seen that episode,
Yep.
just surviving as long as they can. Um, and I do enjoy those, but I don't know. Maybe they will at some point, just because they already have the content. It's almost
That's the
like,
content.
right, right,
Why
right.
not?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they had to comply with some certain timelines with Amazon, but he may end up doing this on his own based on how well this is received. We'll see.
Sure.
He may be bored of it by now. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
he spent a year and a half or whatever, I'm sure longer, just kind of planning, and it's finally done. And when you get into a project, it's like kind of like, oh, it's done. Now I can just kind of ease up a little bit. Even though I'm
Right.
not I'm not at Mr. Beast's level, so I don't know. He may have a lot more gas in the tank for this type of thing because Beast Game season 2, 3, 4, whatever. He may have that in mind and just like have
Sure.
this keep going.
Well, it wouldn't be that hard. I mean, look, there's tons of footage. It's ridiculous. But I'm like, you could take a couple
Tons.
editors. You could take a couple editors, and in a month, bust out an episode. And if it gets 10 million views, you make 30 grand. It's going to pay for all your costs. So from a financial perspective, I don't know why they wouldn't experiment with like Mr. Beast long form and just basically like have his short versions and his long versions and have like another channel. But look,
Yeah.
what do I know? Like I'm a guy with 400 subscribers on YouTube. Giving advice to someone with almost 400 million. Like, what am I doing? Like, just Adam, shut up. Just
It's
shut up. You know nothing, man.
Hey
Get out
man,
of here.
I agree with you. I'm only speaking for what I would personally like to see, just because I
Me too. Me too.
experienced it. But yeah, I mean that's really what it's all about, isn't it? Like the reason people tune into is because, well, at least for me, when I watch something, it's like I'm translated into and put into their shoes and like, wow, what if I were doing that situation? And in some way, it's kind of living vicariously through these people. Like, what if I were in that situation? And that I think really is a great formula for these types of shows. And the reason why people tune in is because it is exciting and it does trigger something within you to think bigger and to hope and to laugh and and feel all the emotions even though you're just sitting there watching, right? It's kind of an incredible phenomenon, and I was just glad to be a part of it. 747.
747. What was the most intense game for you? I have some notes here, and basically I calculated that you played 11 games, and that's if you include the $1 million bribe that kicked off Amazon Prime episode one, which some people aren't calling a game or a challenge. But in any case, you went through 11 of these scenarios. Which
Yeah.
one was the most compelling, interesting, nerve-wracking? What game stands out to you as like, holy moly, that was the game?
Okay. Now for me personally, it was game number 4 in Vegas, the preliminaries. where the platform game where we all had to be on a platform. Um, I don't know. Do you want me to kind of explain the premise? Anyway,
No, everyone knows the premise, and I mean, do what you want. But I mean, this is super surprising to me. I'm surprised that you named this one. I would have never thought that.
so this one is I would say it's a close between that and level 2 on the tower games. Is that the level I was on where self-elimination? Yeah. I mean, that wasn't really as hard. It was just kind of a unique situation in that it was one of the harder of the 4 tower games. Most emotionally charged, I suppose, which is interesting because even that wasn't the level of emotional stress wasn't it didn't convey in the amount of time that they actually showed.
No.
Right, right. None of it did to me.
I want to hear about it. I want to hear about level 2, but tell me about the platform game in episode 0.
So basically, this was the last game. We had all been together. I don't know, was it 3, 4, 5 days maybe? And everyone started to develop their friendships, already had their friendships. So I had a group of guys. Um, you were among them, although
Right.
I think you kind of did your own thing in that sense, which is great. I'm glad you did because you made it past that round. But here's the thing: we had to split up into teams of 100. I stuck with my guys because we're like, yeah, let's just support each other, you know. And so we picked this team, which was full of like alpha people, right? So much so that when we tried to organize ourselves into 10 rows of 10, we couldn't do that because everyone was speaking over each other and like wanting to have their voice heard. All like alpha leaders trying to have their voice heard. Nothing was getting done. Time was running out. This was the last game. And I happened to have the biggest headache. I don't know. It just came on like hours before and I couldn't shake it because we had to sit up in the bleachers for like hours. I don't know if you remember that prior to doing
Yeah.
that game. We were up in the bleachers,
Yeah.
so super uncomfortable. And this massive headache came on. And I rarely get headaches. And when they do, it's like, oh, it sucks because it's hard to shake it. And I was like, water, breathing, you know, like stretching. And then nope. Anyway, I think it was also just compounded from everything else that had happened up
Totally.
to that point, emotionally, etc. So dude, I was not feeling it at all. I wasn't feeling the vibe of the group, and
Right.
time was running out, man, and I was feeling such intense pressure because I didn't want to leave my crew, but I knew I had to because I knew my wife has this saying, it's like as a thing starts, it will end, right? So if it starts chaotic, it's going to end chaotic. And so I was like, guys, I can't stay here. And I just like found another group. And fast forward, it ended up that the group that I was in that I left, that I didn't vibe with, they were the team that the gal jumped off on, and all of them left. So had I not made that decision, as hard as it was, I would not have advanced. That would have been the end of my journey on Beast Games. So never would have made it to Toronto. You know,
Wow.
yeah. And so that for me was probably the hardest one. Not for the challenge in and of itself. That was easy. You know, anyone could stay on a platform and not accept the bribe of whatever, 50K, $1 million, because everyone wanted to make it to Toronto to
Right.
Beast Games, right? To be part of that 1,000. And I was included in that. So the game itself wasn't, it was well, I guess that was part of the game, the mental aspect. You know, it's like, yeah.
Do you think that was so profound when you look back on it because of maybe it was almost like a test? It was a very high pressure test for you to read your
Sure, yeah.
situation,
Mhm.
interact with your own body, the experience, the pressure, and then to make a decision. And it validated almost your perspective on life in terms of who you want to associate with, how you want to live. Do you think it
Yeah.
was some sort of spiritual thing at some
Yeah.
level where you're like, whoa, that's why it was so impactful for you?
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because I believe 100% it was. In fact, it couldn't have happened any other way for me personally. That's just me. Some may call it luck, some may call it intuition. I call it listening to my own guide. You know what I'm saying? It is it was my intuition. It was that inner voice, you know? And sometimes you need to take a step back because your mind can take over and just logically try and plan everything out. But some things you just kind of have. I'm learning all things. You should really trust your instinct first, and then your head can. Sometimes your head doesn't even make sense of
No,
anything, right? Because
no,
it's limited in what it sees and hears. It's limited to just this physical realm. But your inner being, to me, is tied into everything.
yeah,
All the energy that's swirling around in the entire universe, like I'm connected to that, and that can foresee, that can
totally.
connect in ways that I just simply can't because, I'm made of flesh and bone.
Sure.
And I'm limited in my abilities, right? So yeah, it
There's
definitely
yeah.
was a more of a spiritual thing, in my opinion. But yeah.
There's this spiritual teacher I like, and he says that the physical mind is not capable. Oh, wow, wow. How does he say it? Something like the physical mind is not capable, is not designed to understand what will happen. It is only able to see what
Mm.
is happening and what has
Mm-hmm.
happened.
Yeah.
And so his view is that by following like your mind to try to predict the future, it's not the right approach. He says you have to follow your excitement. And it's kind
I
of
like
like to
that.
the inner knowing, which is like, anyway, it's
Yep.
just kind of an idea that's counterintuitive to the way we look at the world, which is like, what do you want to do with your life? Like, think cerebrally.
Yeah.
And some people say, don't do that. And you didn't do that. And you moved on.
I'll tell you, man, I couldn't do that because the inner voice was so strong. And I think, how monks and certain religions, to try and achieve a height of spirituality or enlightenment would deprive themselves of earthly pleasures, food,
Sure.
whatever, comfort,
Right.
and that would essentially deaden the physical aspect of themselves and heighten the spiritual aspect. So because we were in these situations with the games where we weren't eating very much, right? Our physical apparatuses were kind of at its lowest. It
Whoa.
was hard to kind of use your mental capacity to think straight, right?
Huh.
Um, so I don't know. I had to rely on my instinct at that point because it was speaking so loudly to me. I just had to make that move, even though I knew consciously when I thought about it, dude, I'm leaving my friends. Like this is jacked, like why would I do that? But I just had to. And it was
Yeah.
okay. Also, the hardest thing was when they left, they had to immediately exit the platform and walk to the exit and leave the stadium. And I was standing there watching them, and I was like, dude, I didn't even get to say bye to them. I didn't even get their numbers or anything. Thankfully, I got yours. You know what I mean? Because I don't know. None of them are on Instagram either that I could see or come across them, which is crazy. Maybe it just wasn't meant to be. Maybe really I just went through that process for my own personal learning and understanding, right?
Hmm. I felt kind of similar in terms of the whole experience. So my mom is really religious. I don't consider
Hmm.
myself religious. I consider myself
Yeah.
spiritual, but
Yeah.
grew up in a strong church. And
Okay. Right on.
she still prays and goes to church, very religious. And she said she was given this message as I was leaving for Beast Games Vegas. And the message she was given was that Adam's going to learn about himself.
Hmm. I love that.
And so I was like, okay. And then I got back and I just, processed it and realized, yeah, I learned a lot. Um, I feel like that related to what you were saying, and I feel like it doesn't. There's
No,
something. There's something in there. There's something in there.
100%. In fact, I'm starting to see that everything in life, every day is an opportunity to learn more about yourself. In fact, I
Mm,
I, I feel like that's kind of why we're here. That's kind of why we were born is to experience life to the fullest, and if we're not
mm,
in tune with ourselves, the life just kind of happens to us rather than for us. Like
mm.
we're not in charge of ourselves. Things just happen to us and we just kind of flow like a leaf blowing in the wind wherever life takes us. We're not conscious enough to be aware of our own connection to ourselves in the greater picture that we're not able to leave these lives that are exciting and full of twists and turns. Even in the bad stuff, I've learned so much, and I continue to do so, which is it's awesome, man. I mean, like meeting people like you, it's this is what life is all about, and being open enough to receive these types of things, I think is why I'm here. And I'd like to be this for other people as well,
Mm.
you know?
I agree with a lot of that for sure.
Yeah.
Tell me this. So you get to episode 2, you get to like the second night or so. Maybe it was the third
Yeah.
night if you had a daybreak. I don't know, but you're playing your game. Less is more. Uh, did you have any prediction of what the game was going to be before the game started?
So the one thing I noticed that's very funny and interesting to me about people when we're put in these situations is we like to speculate a lot of things. And really, so like I tried to not participate, but it's hard because crowd mentality, you just kind of,
Sure.
you know, you just join in.
Sure.
But anyway, so there was a lot of speculation on what it was. Because of the title, it was Less is More. We knew that it probably involved some like elimination, or self-elimination type thing. So yeah, and looking back compared to all the other games, it was probably the most tough one. Not as fun as like tossing a ball into a big Dixie cup or right? Like that would have been fun. I wish I could have tried all the games, but
Right.
yeah, so we did have some kind of inkling on what was going to happen, and so we're like, oh man, this is going to suck.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
here's an interesting observation that I have.
Yeah, what's
It
up?
it 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 was the toughest game, clearly. Like I think from an outside perspective, I'm going to trust your opinion. I happen to agree with it, but not because of anything that my view is. It was the toughest game, but it was the one game that you could actually have a profound impact on your team. Because I thought about every other game, and it's like catching a ball. Like
True.
The way that one went out, it just happened, right?
Yeah.
The throwing down with the balls, like whether someone made it or missed it, didn't change the outcome. And then answering questions are kind of in a group. Not many
Sure.
questions were missed, but that game was and so like I didn't like the 4 games that they played, or I didn't like 3 of them. I didn't like 3 of them because it just felt like they took away any individuality, any control. You were part of now a mass group, and you're kind of at the what's the word for it? Like whatever happened with the group, you were the outcome of.
Yeah.
But your game, there was
100%.
some influence though, because you could talk to people. So what was that like?
I agree with you. It seems like every game up to this point, um, a lot of it was luck. A lot of it was based off of just, like you said, out of your control. But I feel like that is one of the more effective ways to kind of weed out a lot of people. It's not until you get down to less contestants, like 50, 40, 30, can you really have the outcome be based on the individual. But I would imagine even up until like the last 2 players, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. But it's always going to come down because there are other people vying for this top spot. Everyone's going to need everyone else to get there because obviously people need to get out. And so anyway, having said that, yeah, level 2 was hard. And let's see, although I did have opportunities to kind of influence people on an individual level, many of them, but it's tough because everyone was kind of stressed out. And by this point, I was like kind of in tune with my gut feeling, and I just knew we were going to win. And so I had this calm, excited demeanor. And everyone else was, I was participating, but then I was like on the side, like, hey, here's what's going on. Like, this is just a game. You know what I mean? Let's just breathe. Like, we can strategize, yes, but at the end of the day, the decision will be made, and the decision you make for yourself and how you handle yourself right now is what's going to matter to you, and it's what's going to stick with you regardless of the outcome, right? Because you can have a positive attitude, or you can sit there and cry and sulk and like be afraid of the outcome. So I don't know, that's my optimistic view on life as well, is to kind of rally the troops when things look bad and provide them with a positive spin. In fact, when the time ran out and they were deliberating, like people were like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I don't know if we like if enough people self-sacrificed on our team. I'm like, yeah, I think we did because we let go of 4 people. I don't remember the specific situation, but I don't remember their names either. Landry may have been one of them. You know Landry, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think she
No,
was on. What?
well, she made it past this round. I don't remember what game she was in.
Okay, yeah. Oh no, I'm getting that crossed with another situation with where I talked to her about it was when we had to pick our 4 leaders and they all turned down
Right.
$1 million. That was when I talked to Landry. Anyway, I was telling this other gal and several other gals too, like my perspective, and they're like, "Thank you, that is so helpful." Like, I I will stick with that, like with that perspective, which kind of made me feel good because it's like, well, it's done now. What can you do but
What
stress
can you
over
do?
it? No, you can't really stress over a situation like that. So I don't know. It was while it was pretty stressful, like I thought it was fun because it was I always like to observe people and see how they're
Mm,
responding in these situations. Like, oh wow, that person's sitting in the corner crying. Oh, that person is like trying to pick up the phone and call the other side. uh, so in those types of situations, like a, a leadership style like that's loud and gregarious, that's not me. I'm more of the. I mean, I could rally the troops for sure when given that opportunity and like put in that position, but like I really like talking to them one on one and trying to hit as many people as I can with my positive influence.
totally. Did you have any impulse at all to leave to self-sacrifice yourself?
No, zero. In fact, I, I call it selfish or whatever, but I just knew I wasn't going to. Um, and I felt like with that many people, I don't know how many people there were, 80 or so in the group. I knew that there would be enough to make it through. Um, because it is a lot of pressure and people are at different places in life spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and that may have been too much for a lot of them, and in fact 4 of them to be precise that walked out the door and sacrificed themselves for whatever reason. That's their own
Totally.
personal,
Totally.
but for me I was like, no, I'm not gonna intentionally leave unless I am like kicked out or lose a challenge
Right.
you know
Well, I want to get to that too because you actually when your time did come, I have some questions about that. But
no
I know I don't want to make you relive it,
no,
uh,
it's all fine.
but
I've spent some time contemplating
processing.
and processing it and dealing with it. Yeah.
Well, everyone has their reasons for leaving the games. Like in the self-sacrifice games, everyone had their reasons, right? I had a reason. People in game two with the Lions had a reason. But I did notice from an outside perspective, watching the games, and from what I experienced in Vegas and hearing stories, some people, for lack of a better word, cracked. Some people, it seems, couldn't handle the pressure and the dynamics. And once they were given a way out, given the emotions and situation, they're kind of like, all right, I'm done. This isn't out for me.
Hmm.
And I found that to be interesting as well. And you obviously weren't that. You would have gone to the end if you had been given the chance. But I think it was a different type of pressure, and not everyone I think is built for that type of pressure.
Yeah, 100%. Which is why I mean I'm really appreciative of this of Mr. Beast and whoever does this type of thing, and just being able to be a part of it to observe human behavior. I think this is the most interesting thing to me. You know what I mean? And then how similar minds kind of flock together. I don't know, you can call it energetic wavelengths.
Mm,
My wife was the one that pointed this out to me. Well, we were watching the games, as a family here, the first 3 episodes. I was like, oh yeah, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that guy, and these were all the people that I know that were personally friends of mine throughout the games that I hung out with the most. That I know made it far as well, top 12, top whatever. Um, and my wife's like, what's funny is like you were friends with all the people at the top, and so
yeah, yeah,
that must make me, which also brings into question, well, if I'm of that same mentality, why did I get out so early? And that's a little bit frustrating of a question that I ask myself, because and I was having this conversation with another guy, Mike, Matthew Emershy. He got up in the Red Box Challenge when I did too, and the next morning at the hotel, we had seen each other for breakfast and we started talking. And he was like super down and frustrated, like just on his face. It's just like trying to think of why he got out. You know what I mean? Because he shouldn't have got out, at least in his mind. And so we had a really good conversation on the deeper uh, meaning of why each of us could have gotten out, which was like really, really interesting. And it kind of stuck with me. And I think it affected him in a positive way as well. But um, anyway, it just being able to observe like who you naturally gravitate towards is like your people. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing to observe.
Yeah.
As well.
I thought that I feel like I learned a lot about humans in the Vegas games because the dynamics and the way people like the alpha leaders and
Exactly.
the group dynamics and people chanting. And I just said, this is really fascinating to really observe. It was a pure environment to really observe humans in almost a primal way in this survival, localized, contained arena
Right.
that you don't get in real life.
Right. You want to know what's interesting? Can I mention this? So
Please.
all the lower numbers flags were more headstrong and like, I'm going to get this because they were first to go, grab their flags and claim their spot. Right. So these were the alpha males and females of the group. Well, in the first games in Toronto, the very first game, or maybe it was the second game,
right,
where the first, second, and third rows all got eliminated.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because even the group that on the platform game in Vegas, the last game that was the hardest one for me, I realized that, these were all the alpha people, and I gravitated towards that at first, but my intuition was telling me, no, don't be with this group. It's just interesting to observe that there's a saying, I think it's from the Bible, the first will be last and the last will be first. Well, the people who were like headstrong and driven were like the first to go, in the games, which was super ironic, right?
Super ironic.
Super ironic. It's funny how life is sometimes.
Yeah, they gave a game that all of a sudden, given the layout of the people, didn't favor the most headstrong, athletic people, which I don't think they expected that. In fact, I think
I don't either.
Like they did. I don't know if you remember this. They did some shots when we were in the hotels waiting to go into the Toronto games, like a day or two before. They brought like the first 200 numbers or something out to do some promo shots.
Yeah.
Almost all those people were gone by the second game. So I think I've heard that the production was like, oh crap, those are all the people that we shot promo shots with, and now they're gone. We can't even use them later in the production. So nobody was expecting that, I don't think. Even though people playing the games.
That's interesting. Yeah, because it's like, you're right. No, that's a good observation. I didn't realize that.
I have another observation about people getting eliminated in the games. You said you were speaking with Matthew after you guys got out on the Red Box Challenge, and why me, that type of thing. And I realized that in some ways it seemed to me like the games in their chaoticness approximated war. This goes back to kind of the war analogy I had. Prior to the games and since, I've somehow stumbled into the rabbit hole of vets talking about World War II. And you get these amazing podcasts of people who were at the Battle of the Bulge or, fought in Western Europe and all these things. You get these crazy stories.
Okay.
And you start to understand, okay, like I've been thinking about, why did this person survive? He's like, I'm the only guy in my platoon. I just read a book on the invasion of Normandy. Incredible. And so I'm like thinking in my mind, how do you survive this situation? And it's pretty clear to me that probably the highest correlated metric to surviving is not a metric at all. It's luck. Because you get people who are extremely bold doing stupid stuff and they survive. You get people who are cowards and they survive. You get people who are cowards and they die. It just seems like right place, right time, wrong place, wrong time. And there's just like nothing you can do. You're just a number. And I actually thought what would be extremely profound is if they did a Beast Games season 2 and they thought of games that approximated survival rates and survival randomness of war situations. Like just as like it didn't even have to be anything about the games. The games could be about balloons and unicorns. But they were like, okay, let's take this battle from World War II. What was the survival rate? How did people survive? and try to approximate games. So it was like, a 21st century imitation of how difficult it was to survive a crazy war zone. Anyway, I just think when it comes down to it, almost everybody lost, and that's how the game was designed. And if it wasn't your time now, it's going to be your time later, most likely. And
Yeah.
it was luck more than anything. Although some games had more skill than others.
Yeah, bro, I agree with you on many levels. We have these, my wife and I have these types of conversations. And she would probably argue that it isn't necessarily about luck. On the outside, it may appear so because of the randomness of it. But she would probably say it all comes down to your own personal vibration and frequency of where your baseline, I guess, belief. It's hard to kind of put these into words, but no matter what the situation may be, it all comes down to your own whatever frequency, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if that makes any sense to you at all, or if anyone would understand that, but yeah, because it is such a concept that's outside of the realm of my own understanding, because everything is kind of a frequency, right? So I don't know.
No, it makes sense to me. I mean, these are the questions that I think humans have wrestled with. I don't know, maybe since the scientific method came about, maybe, but it's something about determinism versus free will. And then there's also, for me, I try to overlay that with probability because I realize that as an individual, there's a lot of variance, but as a mass, there's low variance, right? So, for example, let's take any game in Beast Games. You could say, okay, 75% of the people survive. Cool. But any individual has a variance of 100% because either survive or they don't, right? So like as an individual experience,
I got you.
As an individual experience, something is 100% likely or 0% likely in retrospect, right? But that's different from a mass group of people from a probability perspective. So anyway, what I'm saying is that these questions that you're raising up, the spirituality that you have in your wife, it wrestles with some of the deepest questions of existence, I think. And that's profound.
It is profound. Maybe we just need to get out more. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe we need a Beast Game season 2 so we can continue to explore these topics.
That's the only reason I would play these types of things moving forward, is to I don't know, maybe it's a good gauge to kind of see where I'm at in relation to how far I've come in life in terms of, working on my own perspective, I guess, in broad terms. Plus, it's fun. I mean, it's just fun. Like, I really wish I would have made it through, and seeing the promos for upcoming episodes and what they got to do. I'm just like, oh man, that would have been so awesome, dude. And I would have kicked booty doing that stuff. You know what I mean?
I think you would have. I think you were one of the people who were uniquely qualified to go really far in the games. Like,
oh, thanks.
Not everyone had the same percent chance of winning the games, in my opinion. Some people had a higher chance than others because of different things.
Yeah.
But that's one of the discussion. I have a big question for you, and then
what's up?
I want to have a short conversation if we get there about the $1 million bribe with the 4 teams and the leaders.
Would love to.
And then I want to get at the end to the red box challenge with you.
Okay.
What happened there?
All right. Perfect.
So the bigger question is this. I went through all the games you played. I believe you played 11 games in total, including Vegas and Toronto.
Okay.
That's if you include... Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's impressive. I didn't even know how many games I played.
Yeah. I believe it was 11, and that doesn't include the sack race, which was kind of a fake, fun game with a prize. Yeah. And it didn't, and that also includes the $1 million bribe, which was kind of...
I see.
The beginning of Amazon Prime, which may or maybe not be a game. In any case, of the 11 games, holy crud, of the 11 games that you played, 7 of them were based on self-sacrifice.
Okay.
Yeah, you did. 7 of 11 games are self-sacrifice. And if you don't include that $1 million bribe to start off the Amazon Prime show, you played 10 games and 6 were self-elimination based games. Do like you lived the life of my future is based on the decisions of other people and the decisions of other people to continue playing the game or not. Have you reflected at all about that, or do you have any feelings towards your experience being so heavily weighted towards that type of game?
Yeah, I've given this some thought, and it's a little bit frustrating. And this ties into what I was saying earlier about it all comes down to your own frequency and kind of underlying core belief about your perspective on everything in life, yourself included. Um, but it does seem a little bit frustrating that the fate of your outcome can lie in any number of people out there. But keeping in mind that I mean, this is the way the games are structured, and it's designed to um, cause you to have as least control as possible. Uh, and to what you were saying earlier, it a lot of it does seem like it just comes down to luck. Um, but then I can hear my wife saying, "But does it though? But does it though?" You know what I mean? Like, I I truly
Right.
believe, because I honestly believed I would have made it all the way. I had a vision of it, I saw it, and I felt it so real. I lived that moment when I won in my own mind, which
Wow.
I suppose going through that process was important for me. And maybe that was for another time and place
Right.
in the multiverse. You know, perhaps it could have been a physically manifested reality for me,
Sure.
actually winning this Beast Games, but maybe it was for, you know, the second or third season. Who knows? But that's the thing though that I want to say about that is like being able to see that and to be consciously aware that, okay, I may have seen and felt this outcome, but this didn't happen. Well, either it really wasn't in the cards for me, or the process along the way is what, like the journey, there's a saying, it's like not about the destination, but about the journey. And I truly am seeing that really is true, because if I'm not connected throughout every process of this journey, then there's no learning opportunity, there's no growth, there's nothing to self-reflect on, because life is just continually happening to me, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, to kind of go back to what you were saying about, um, 6 or 7 of the 11 games I played were based on self-sacrifice. One, I knew I wasn't going to self-sacrifice. Two, I knew other people would self-sacrifice themselves. So maybe
Mm.
that's what made me able to pass through those levels. I, I can't wait to get to the red box, because there's a lot there to unpack, which
Well,
which may be for another podcast altogether,
no.
just because, yeah, you're like,
I,
no.
I want to skip right to it then, but I do want to comment on your experience because I had a little bit of a similar experience, which I've thought a lot about. Going into the Beast Games in Vegas, I had this weird inner knowing that I was going to win the games.
Mm,
And in my life, there's two types of knowing. One is kind of
hmm.
this head knowing,
Yeah,
and the other one is like this heart knowing.
yeah.
And the heart knowing has never been wrong in my life.
Mm,
And it's very subtle and nuanced, but it was going into the games, I was like, I don't see how I'm going to win. There's too many people, but somehow I know I'm going to win. It was very strange. I never felt anything quite like it with
hmm.
such, you could say, insurmountable odds.
Sure.
Then after the games, I came home, and then I don't know when it happened. It might have been when I got the call about Law and Order, but it might have even been before. There was a shift, and all of a sudden I could feel there was doubt, and I was like, "Oh, you're not
Mm.
going to win."
Oh, okay.
And so it was just kind of a weird. What I'm saying is, it was a similar experience to you, where there was a time at least where I couldn't even explain why, and it didn't even make sense. And I said, Adam, you're stupid. But I was like, in my heart, it feels like I'm going to win these games. Like this is what I'm destined to do. It was super weird. So obviously that
I'm
didn't
right
happen.
there, man. Yeah.
Maybe it's a parallel reality,
You
and I was in tune with
exactly.
that vibration, and the
Sure.
decision tree of of free will took me in a
Right.
different path.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was crazy.
No, no, no. No. I mean, that's exactly what happened in the red box challenge. Like, that was the point where and I'll tell you why later once we dig deeper into that.
Let's do it.
Uh,
Let's go into it. Let's break it down.
all right. Well, do you have any kind of setup for that, or you just jump
Yeah.
right in?
Well, in every game, they
Mhm.
portrayed the game in some ways differently than how it happened. Most obviously in the setup. So all the games took hours to set up, or like you said in episode 2, it took a day to play each game. What was the setup for the red box challenge? I think you're like handcuffed to people or something, walking into the boxes. Did you wait in the boxes for hours before they announced the rules? Like, tell me about kind of going into the game,
Sure.
what that was like, and how it's different from what was
Yeah.
portrayed on TV.
So let's go rewind that a little bit further. So we had just finished the tower challenges, and the next day they were like, "You guys survived that. Congratulations. We're gonna have a day of fun." And it was the sack races. So it's like partner up with your friends, whatever. And joyous, it was fun. But that was all just a setup to kind of get us to pair up with the people that we're closest with, because we were going to be going against them in the Red Box Challenge.
Totally.
Like,
Totally.
it was crazy. But
Bait
the
and
whole
switch.
yeah, bait and switch. Exactly. The whole handcuff thing was kind of just for show, for drama. Uh, it it had a little bit to do with the game, but not really. They just handcuffed us like we were prisoners going into this underground bunker. Which the red door that we walked through was actually just a facade. It led to nothing. We didn't even walk through there. That was just to film that one part of us looking like we were walking through there, going into an underground bunker. Little
Wow.
little side kind of information there, but so we were actually bussed to another warehouse where the Red Box Challenge actually took place, in another air hangar. That's what you call it, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So once we got there, we all kind of got unshackled. Well, we were unshackled by then. We weren't shackled the whole time. That was literally for like 30 seconds of filming that one shot going in. So you've seen the Red Box Challenge in the episode. The handcuff was on the wall. So that was kind of the segue into that. Was we were handcuffed together, and now one of us has to handcuff ourselves to the wall to indicate that you were self-sacrificing yourself. Self-sacrificing yourself.
Right. How close, the two people you were with that you had done the sack race with, how close were you to them? Were they actually good friends, or were you suspicious of the setup? And
I didn't really have like super close friends, none that were near me when we were all picking people. So, Jeremy, he was one of the leader, the polar bear with the big beard, right? He was standing right there. He's like, "Hey, Mark, you want to join you want to partner for the sack race?" I was like, "Sure, that sounds good." And there's this one other guy, man, I forgot his name, dude. I feel so bad. Really cool guy. But his name slips my mind. I do know he lives in San Clemente though, and he's a firefighter. But beyond that, I totally forgot his name, which sucks. But he's a real cool guy, very soft spoken, just kind of a gentle spirit about him, like not crazy or anything, but just a cool, solid guy. And Jeremy had asked him to kind of join because he's like, "Hey, I just want to get to know you guys better and let's like have some fun." And I always wanted to kind of get to know Jeremy. In fact, I met Jeremy at the Capture the Flag Challenge in Vegas.
no way.
Someone introduced me. It was like, "Oh, this guy was on another episode or another Mr. Beast YouTube video."
Yeah.
I forgot which one he did, but I was
I
like, "Oh,
don't
hey,
know
what's
either,
up, man?"
but I heard it.
Yeah. And apparently he made it far. But anyway, that was
so
the same guy, and I've always wanted to kind of get to know him better, and this was the perfect time. I was like, "Yeah, sure." So that's what happened.
Okay, so you kind of knew these guys, but you weren't like, they weren't your best buds from the show.
No.
So you're going into the games with two guys who you respect, who you like as people,
Sure.
but they're not
Yeah.
like, you're not like, "This is my brother till I die."
No, but it's hard for me to be an a-hole and like throw anyone under the bus unless they were like a jerk to me. That's just not how I do things. So I just went in thinking like, "Oh, this would be fun, like get to know them and hang out," right? So, but anyway, when we get into the box, that is pretty much immediately they go over the rules and the timer
Oh,
started.
crap.
Yeah, so we didn't. That's why the expressions they were showing on people's faces when they like that was real. We were just like we knew that one person had to be eliminated, but we just didn't know how long we were going to be in there for. We didn't know what the phone was for. Nothing. We knew nothing. All we knew was that we already started to kind of strategize how we were going to do it. And immediately Jeremy he wanted to I forgot what he wanted to do. Shoot, I think play a game or something. Risk. He wanted to play Risk. And I was just like suspicious. I felt this like,
You must be good at this game.
yeah, exactly. I was like, that is an oddly specific game to choose to, eliminate one of us. In hindsight, I guess anything would have it wouldn't have mattered, because a lot of it does come to chance, right?
But how did you know? So you say you're going into the boxes. They haven't sorted the rules, but you know one of you has to go. Oh,
Mhm.
because he said that, didn't he say one of you guys was? He said that, I think.
Yeah, I believe he
Okay.
did.
Okay.
Whether or not he did, I'm sure he did, but we knew by that point. And so I don't think what they did say though, up until when they told us in the red box, was that if no one can decide on who is going to self eliminate, all three people would go home. And so that was kind of a curveball, and we were just like, oh. And in fact, there were so many people. In fact, he was on the segment. I think his name's Tyler or whatever. Another real cool guy. He ended up leaving because they couldn't make a decision. And
Wow.
the girl that said she was going to do it in his box, like she ended up doing it, but the time had already run out and they
Right.
didn't.
I saw that. They're like four
Yeah.
seconds too late.
Oh
That was
yeah. Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. It was crazy.
So
But
you mentioned there was a couple things you wanted to get into about this game. Just start riffing. Like what was profound about it, or what did you want to talk about?
well, so 5 hours. The telephone was to ask for anything you wanted. So I'm like, all right, I'll ask for paints. I'll ask for which they never gave. Uh, inflatable palm tree because I wanted to make the place look nice while we were in there for 5 hours. But we got a guitar and Jeremy got a tattoo freaking put on his calf.
That's
You know,
crazy.
it was crazy, dude. There was another guy that had the Beast logo like tattooed on his bicep.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Got eliminated. Yeah. So anyway, I knew right away. I was like, we need to make this fair, because obviously none of us are gonna want to leave. So let's like do a dice or coin toss. And Jeremy he was not into that, I don't know why. I mean, just because he didn't want to have it leave up to chance, I guess.
Totally, totally. Of course, he wanted to tilt the game to himself. He was a good
Yeah,
strategist. Probably.
exactly. And I understand that, which kudos to him. He made it past the red box anyway. But so anyway, 5 hours, we're just hanging out. So the time comes and we're just like, all right, let's do the coin toss. Jeremy goes first, heads. Other guy goes second. I forgot his name. Uh, goes second,
Firefighter.
heads. Yeah, the firefighter, and I go tails. And I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe it. I was just like staring at the floor. Mr. Beast was in there the whole time too while we did the coin flip. They filmed the whole thing, and Mr. Beast was like, "Oh my gosh, you flipped the tails. That means you're out." And I was like, I couldn't believe it. And Jeremy and the firefighter guy were like just standing there like somber, long faces, like looking at me like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry, dude." And I couldn't believe it. But I still had to go and grab the handcuffs and handcuff myself to the wall. And I was like, I don't know if I could do this, guys. Like, I didn't think my story would end here. I honestly didn't believe that. I was dumbfounded. Mr. Beast is looking at me like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I grabbed the thing and I was about to do it. And then I like stopped. I was like, at some point, I think I drew it out a little too long just to whatever, because I went through all the emotions. I was angry. I was just like dumbfounded. I couldn't believe it. But I eventually just was like, all right, guys, I'm going to do it. Like, there's no reason to I even pleaded. I was like, well, maybe we can do it again. And they're just like, no, sorry. I was like, okay, all right. And I did it.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It, it sucked, dude. It sucked.
It
It
it's
sucked.
not till now that you walked through a little bit of how it happened that I realized how difficult it would have been to put the handcuff on yourself.
Yeah.
It
Well,
sounds like it was like semi-torture. Like I have to, why am I doing this? Like why am I, it reminds me of Neo in the Matrix, right? Where like they're about to unplug Morpheus and he's like, stop. It's like, why are we doing this? And it's like, wait, there's another way, and you're kind of like, why am I doing this? And they're like,
yeah.
sorry, dude, you got to do it. And you're like,
Yeah.
you do it.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally. Totally. And I was a little numb, so I just did it. You know what I mean? And was just so shocked. It was more shocked than anything.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man.
Why did you, so you guys, it was unclear in the show, even though they showed it. Did you guys decide to flip a coin and it was the odd man out is gone?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 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 And if there was no odd man out, we would just keep flipping until, two got the same and the third person was out.
No.
It's basically odd man out. Yeah.
Why didn't you guys decide to do multiple rounds? So you suggested this after you lost, but also other groups did kind of like simple games. And I was like, why not do the game 10 times? Like, for example, there's one group that rolled dice.
That's
And
true.
and I was like, why don't you roll the dice 10 times? Whoever has the lowest cumulative score is out. Like, why did people just leave it up to one time? What were you guys thinking?
That's a good point. We didn't actually think about that. Well, it wasn't mentioned.
Interesting.
It's easy to go back and be like, oh, we could have done this and that, but
Sure.
it happened. And the reason why I didn't like push is I could have waited. It crossed my mind like I just won't handcuff myself and I'll get these guys out. But the other side of me was just like, nah, dude, don't be that guy on camera. The societal pressure, but not to mention just my integrity. I said I was going to do it. Like if I
Right.
flipped the thing, then I was going to go out. I'm fine with it now because I'm still gleaning off of information that I can gather about myself, about how it went down, why it went down, the situation, and how it presented itself. The very fact that Jeremy picked me, was all part of this learning learning process. Like the greatest teacher is failure, and I always saw failure as tied into me somehow being sorry, bro. I'm feeling this, man. Like, because this is it's still fresh for me, and I'm like, failure does not equate to me losing or being a loser or not worthy of winning, and I've struggled with that my whole life. Up until now, which is why I'm glad I'm actually to the point where I can observe all the things that went into contributing to this outcome of not getting to the next level. That to me is the greatest teacher. Like I never probably could have learned that lesson having not gone through that. So was it worth $5 million? Yeah, I could say it was a $5 million lesson to learn more about myself. And the thing that helps me more is like it's it's not just about the money. Like this really was truly about the experience of getting to where I did and the reasons why I got to where I did. But money is money. Money will flow from wherever in greater abundance. Like whether it's 5 million, 100 million, you get what I'm saying? Like 100,000, it doesn't matter. It's more of the attitude that I have behind everything that I'm doing that will allow those types of things that I want to flow into my life to be able to flow into my life. Anyway.
Yeah. One of the questions I was going to ask you, and it sounds like you answered it, was did it occur to you to not put the handcuff on after you lost? And you're saying that it did occur to you, but not in a serious way because your integrity was more important to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's another thing that I'm learning is that I am multifaceted, right? And I've always shunned the darker aspects of human nature, like anger and deceit. And even though those are emotions that every human can and should feel, There was sort of a kind of a turning away from those things. In some way, I believe that feeling those things made me a bad person. Um, so even thoughts, just, as thoughts come into my mind, like, oh man, I could just screw these guys over and like not put the handcuffs on, it's like, screw you, dude. You know what I mean? Like, I'll never see you again. But I allowed myself to feel that in the moment because it kind of helped me to cope with it. You know what I mean? That's just a natural thing that humans, I feel, go through. It's just that whatever throughout life, somehow that gets short circuited or it's not fostered. The ability to feel and recognize and process your emotions properly. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that thought crossed my mind. And maybe I should have done it. You know what I mean? That would have been interesting. That would have made some very interesting TV. I would have pissed them off, but who cares? Like,
Yeah. It thinking about the games from a game theory perspective will fascinate me to no end, and especially in the game. So when we had each game that happened, I played with a very strategic mind.
Yeah.
And so I'd think about like, what are people's incentives? How are people going to play? What gives me the best chance to survive, etc. Even in the $1 million bribe that I took, it was, I played in a way calculating like different, like financial, like influences on other people to figure out when is the best time for me to press the button.
Okay.
What I calculate, of course, you can't know this for certain because every situation is different, but it would seem likely that if you didn't press the handcuff, like if you didn't put the handcuff on yourself, there's no incentive for them to put the handcuff on themselves, right? Because they're going to lose, and now they don't even like you. You know what I mean? Like, it almost seems like I don't think it worked for anybody. I mean, I think 1 or 2 people in the show refused to put a handcuff on, and after they lost a game, and the whole group was eliminated. So I think the only way it could even possibly work is if the other 2 people were really close, because then you could say, look, you now have an incentive to put a handcuff on because you're saving your best friend or your brother or your sister or your wife or who's ever in the game. But if you're with like 3 dudes who are all like cool dudes and you're like, sorry, I'm not going to put the handcuff on, they have no incentive to put the handcuff on themselves.
Yeah.
So I don't think if you hadn't done it, it would have been interesting TV. You also would have got Jeremy and the firefighter out for sure. There's no way Jeremy wouldn't have self-sacrificed to save you after you just reneged on your promise, right? So it just seems unlikely they would have helped you anyway. And then your integrity would have been like, well, I guess I know more about myself now in a way that maybe I'm not a big fan of.
That's true. And I just knew I wasn't going to go there. I mean, because I had that scenario play out in my mind. Like if I were ever in a situation where I would screw someone over, I was like, I don't think I would. You know what I mean? Because I know maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is the fundamental belief that I'm wrong about.
Right.
Is that I believe that it will come back to me somehow if I do someone wrong. You know what I mean? Like maybe it just doesn't work that way. I don't know.
Well, I think it does. So this is my strong belief. Karma. I think karma is real. And I think what karma is it's actually a mathematical principle, more or less. What it says is like you eventually get what's coming your way because it's the outcome of your choices along the way. So like, for example, like if you do dumb stuff all the time, like you drive really fast and you drift on highways and you drive drunk, like you might escape 5, 10, 20 times. But if that's your pattern, the odds will hit and you will get in a crash or you'll hit somebody and get thrown in jail for years or whatever. It's like the natural outcome of your choices in life compounded over time is your karma. And what I think is interesting about karma when you think of it that way is it's very difficult to make actions in isolation, right? So for example, I think it's very difficult to lie only once. Like if you can lie only once, then perhaps you could avoid the karmic outcome of being a serial liar. But I just don't think it works that way. I think once you lie once, it becomes easier to lie a second time and easier to lie a third time. And then you just become a liar. And then you become someone who perverts reality in your mind so you don't see things objectively. So you're delusional. Now you believe your lies. So now you're this chronic liar that doesn't even know that you're lying all the time because you believe what you're saying, but you're not connecting it to reality. And then life hits you eventually. Like, so I think for you to be like, okay, this one time I'm going to go back on my word. It's like, good luck. Like, I don't even know if that's possible to only renege on a high pressure situation one time. Because if you do it one time, then it's a reflection of who you are,
Right.
which says that, well, I'll probably renege other times. And then so I think that's where I think karma comes back to us, because we can't, this is my opinion. Obviously, it's like, it could be wrong, but I just think it's very difficult to act differently than who you are only once. Action's a reflection of who you are in the macro. And so I think if you had made a different choice, it probably wouldn't be that you made a different choice. It would be that you were a different person, which is why you would have made that choice. And then that means your karma is going to get you because you make those choices more often. That's how I think about it.
Yeah.
But what do you disagree with me?
No, I don't necessarily disagree. I hear what you're saying. I just am not sure how that all works. You know what I mean? Because
That's there you go.
because I could observe people who made it high in life, and whether or not they did people dirty, I don't know.
Sure.
But there are situations where people have reached infamy in society, in history, that may have been colored in this light of doing people wrong, doing their
Right.
people wrong.
Right.
Yet they were highly revered, or at least still talked about because of what they did.
Sure.
So is that whether or not it was good or bad? Because to me, it's there. I don't know. I think we attach good and bad to like this framework and constructs throughout history that we have built, that says something is good or bad. Um,
Yeah.
That's the only thing I bring into question, is whether or not that good or bad is right or wrong necessarily. Because it almost seems like truth is also on an individual level, because I could believe something so strongly, um, that could be wrong, yet it's still a belief. So does that make me wrong? You know what I mean? Like, if I believe it, then that's my belief. You get what I'm saying?
Sure.
So it's a tough one. I mean, there's a lot there, and I'm not qualified enough to kind of speak on that level, only from what I can believe, obviously.
Sure.
And even then, like I was saying, even what I believe is coming into question every day, by every choice that I make, because I'm able to now at least reflect and say, well, what do I truly believe about that? And every time I see situations happen, like, wow, that guy made it farther than me, yet he was a snake in the games. You know what I mean? Like, I know, you know what I'm saying? Anyway,
A lot of unknowns for sure.
there's a lot of unknowns. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question, kind of like maybe a last question, and we'll
Okay.
see what it spawns.
All right, let's do it.
Can you put a financial value on the games? And I mean that from the perspective of you had this experience that lasted, I mean, depending on how you look at it, a couple months to a couple weeks, and you didn't leave with any prize money outside of what everybody got, which I think was $2,000 to be in the games. If someone said, Mark, here's what we're going to do. We're going to erase your brain so you don't remember anything that happened in the games. We're going to like reset your spirit. We're going to reset your emotions and your experience so that the games never happened to you. But we're going to put money in your bank account for that kind of extraction. Like, do the games have a value? Like, is there, could you prescribe some level of financial, energy to that experience that you think of, like, they could ground it for other people, you know what I mean, who weren't in the games?
Yeah, that's tough, man, because there again, everyone's in different places. I can only speak for myself, obviously. That's kind of an interesting question. Like, erase my mind, and we would just put in your bank account what I felt the value would be of that whole experience. Honestly, it feels like it's even more than $5 million, and here's why. Because seeing it, okay, I feel like now with my age and what I want to experience left in life. Having gone, like, if I were able to go through to the very end and lose it all, like, that would have been worth it to me. Having made it as far as I did to episode 3, that was all worth it to me. Um, I wish I would have made it farther, yes. So to be able to put a value on that experience, I mean, I guess it was what I was given. It does kind of hurt because I do believe, or I do want to have a fair value of exchange for my time for money. But then it's hard to put a value on the life experiences that teach you things. And I see this as a life experience that has taught me a whole lot. Um, and was that worth $5 million? I mean, it has to be because I didn't get the $5 million. So to me, it was a $5 million experience. Um, and if it were 10 million, it'd be 10 million. You know what I mean? So I suppose it could be an infinite number. But there isn't a specific amount where I'd be like, I made it this far, so I should have at least got, you know, 20 grand, 100 grand, whatever. Um, but the experience itself was like, so in another way of putting it, are you asking me to how much I would have paid to be a part of that?
That's one way to phrase it, I suppose. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I mean, that's kind of a little bit nuanced difference. I'm not actually sure how to quantify the question. It's like the question itself is comparing apples to oranges and being like, how
Yeah,
many oranges is the apple worth? And you're like,
yeah.
I'm allergic to oranges, like I don't know, but
It's worth zero.
it's
Yeah.
worth zero, and but like infinite's crazy. Like if someone said, Mark, I'll give you $1 billion to erase that experience. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I would say no to $1 billion, but it's also like it doesn't compute. The question's a weird question, but it's a question nonetheless that I thought was worth asking.
No,
So
it's I think what you're at least what I think you're trying to say is like how invaluable was that experience for you?
mm,
And I'd say it was pretty invaluable. And it's hard for me to put a monetary amount on things like that, um, because I've paid stupid amounts for some experiences that weren't as impactful on my life as some experience that cost far less. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
in that sense, I feel like the games were exactly what I needed in this time of my life. And that is almost like invaluable to me because I'm able to now extract these lessons that, you know, this is part of my continual lifelong journey, right? And
Mm,
process of learning. And my friend, you are part of that now.
I know, right? Yeah. It's a yeah. It was an interesting co-creation that we all manifested together. Right, the game's not complete without everyone who played the games, and
Yeah,
of course,
true.
we were all replaceable in the sense of if I wasn't in the games, someone else would have been in the games. The games would have
Hmm.
continued the way they continued.
Hmm.
But the fact that the 2,000 of us and the 1,000 of us were chosen and competed in those games is it's yeah, I feel a sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, connection, um, fondness, appreciation, admiration, thankfulness, gratefulness for everyone
Hmm.
who was in the games because it felt like such a profoundly unique experience. And for me, it
Hmm.
was on some level such a profound experience emotionally, physically, intellectually, spiritually
Hmm.
that you can't quantify it. I don't even know how to qualify it. I don't even think I yet understand maybe some of the life implications that had on me.
Right.
Maybe in 20 years I'll be like, holy crud, if I hadn't been in Beast Games, then I would be making a different decision now. So I don't even know what like the ripple effect ramifications are of the games,
Hmm.
but I have a profound respect and a profound gratitude for being a part of it. And it sounds like you think very similarly.
100%. 100%. And if I had to do it all over again, I would. Despite the ups and downs, like there was no other experience like it in my life.
Maybe we need a Beast Game season 2 so we can continue to explore
I would love to.
these topics.